morning. I'm Tyson Singer. I'm the Vice President of Technology and Platforms at Spotify, and I am thrilled that today, over the next couple hours, our team is coming together across Europe and the Americas to talk about one of the most exciting projects I've been a part of in my time here. Backstage. So if you're new to the game, let's roll a short video to help you get up to speed.
What is Backstage? Backstage is an open platform for building developer portals. It was created at Spotify and donated to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Okay, but what's a developer portal? And why would I want one? Good question. First, imagine a developer. These days, you're not just writing code. You're also making trips to your cloud provider's console, troubleshooting Kubernetes, managing security and compliance tools, not to mention hunting for documentation that, even if you find it, is rarely up to date. Each task and subtask has its own UI to learn and its own technology to understand. It doesn't take long for context switching and cognitive load to take their toll. And it's happening all across your company. The more you grow, the more chaotic and fragmented your ecosystem becomes. But with a developer portal like Backstage, all your tooling, software components, data, and documentation are centralized behind a single pane of glass. So instead of being overwhelmed by infrastructure, you're in control of it. At the center of Backstage is a software catalog which organizes all your services, websites, mobile features, libraries, and other software components in one place, regardless of how or where they're running. With software templates, you can create new software components with just a few clicks, and with your best practices baked in. With everything centralized and searchable, you can explore your entire ecosystem to build collective knowledge, enable collaboration and reuse, and speed up onboarding. And since Backstage has an extensible plugin architecture built on top of modern technologies and common frameworks, it's easy to add functionality to customize your portal to fit your company's needs. Backstage scales with you, so your teams can build quickly and safely together, reducing infrastructure complexity and increasing developer happiness.
Developers have never been more vital. Every business is a software business. Every company is a technology company. It's more important than ever to enable the folks driving that technology to be more effective at their jobs. For many companies, after years of explosive growth, it's also time to actively contend with how we can do more with less and keep driving towards our business aspirations with fewer resources. At the same time, as you saw in the video, being a developer has never been harder. The complexity that they face on a day-to-day basis has exploded. And as companies grow, bringing on more powerful technologies and more developers, it only gets more complex. We've seen this time and time again, as Backstage has allowed us to work with hundreds of companies, all wrestling with these same challenges. And Spotify definitely hasn't been immune to these trends. But instead of slowing down during growth, as most companies do, we've accelerated our product development with developer retention rates that defy industry averages. How? Our focus on developer effectiveness. We define developer effectiveness as a function of developer productivity and this other concept that we refer to as developer happiness. After years of research and iterating, we've come to understand the causality between developer engagement and satisfaction, aka happiness, and productivity. We believe that for developers, satisfaction and fulfillment typically means creating things. It means shipping great products and features. For everyone, being empowered to do our best work matters. But for developers, being empowered to experiment, try new things, and execute on their ideas really matters. Toil and friction that get in the way of these things quickly reduce developer happiness. Or more simply put, our philosophy is happy developers make happy code. I know, it's a somewhat cheeky tagline, but it's become an ethos over the past few years as we've seen more and more companies adopt Backstage. When we named Spotify's internal developer portal, it felt like an apt metaphor for the technology that helps power the world's largest audio streaming service. Backstage is where so much hidden activity happens to make the performance on stage a great one. Our company mission is to unlock human potential and creativity. Developers are creators, some of the most prolific creators in the world. We believe they need a better experience to do their best work, and that's what we've always aimed to provide with Backstage. The Spotify plugins for Backstage Bundle subscription is just the next step on that journey. We love that Backstage is open source. With the rapid innovation powered by a diverse global community, adopters can leverage the learnings, contributions, and plugins created by others. They also avoid single vendor lock-in and are able to customize their developer portal built off the Backstage framework to meet their needs. Backstage is the only solution in this space with such freedom. In the nearly 3 years since we open sourced it, Backstage has become a thriving, community-led platform. This year, the Backstage maintainers and our contributor community have been hyper-focused on bringing more maturity and enterprise readiness to the platform. From instilling stable versioning and release cycles, to improving the platform security posture, to moving through the CNCF maturity curve to the incubation phase. And what most excites me is the incredible growth we've seen within the community. More than 500 adopters and more than 1,500 contributors across the globe are using Backstage to create better experiences for their fellow developers. In fact, we estimate that Backstage is now being used by more than 1 million end-user developers. Backstage has been adopted by enterprise companies in healthcare, gaming, manufacturing, government, and more. Companies that look and feel a lot like Spotify, and companies that don't. You don't have to be a global audio streaming service to find value from Backstage. You can be a communications tech company trying to make documentation a core citizen within your software. You can be a travel organization looking to enable new joiners to ship in production from day one. You can be a digital real estate company aiming to kill spreadsheets as a service and develop a single source of truth for your tools. In hundreds of examples, we see Backstage delivering real business value when engineers can onboard and get up to speed on new projects more quickly, when context switching between interfaces and systems is reduced, and when it's easy to find the information you need. All of this translates to more creativity and knowledge sharing, higher employee retention rates, and faster time to market. At this point, I think it's clear that Backstage is not only moving the needle on improving software development processes for hundreds of organizations, it's creating a paradigm shift through this concept of developer effectiveness. Let me be clear. Backstage is not a silver bullet that can be thrown into your company and solve everything overnight. And there is no one-size-fits-all approach to successful Backstage adoption. But when it's leveraged, Backstage is a mechanism and a community that can help evolve your business by driving a step change in your organization's developer experience. Why does this matter? Well, for a product development team of 1,000, even a 10% improvement in productivity is equivalent to adding 100 developers per year, which translates to tens of millions in investment. And at Spotify, we've seen much more than a 10% year-over-year increase in our productivity. On top of improving the experience, this also improves engagement and retention, which is strongly correlated with company performance. Before we open sourced it, our teams at Spotify knew what we had with Backstage was special. Our developers loved it, and we'd proven that it was driving better experience, and ultimately our business's success. But when we saw how special it was to others and what it could do for them, we wondered, was there an opportunity to ship more of Spotify's engineering culture beyond our teams? And that's really what we're here to talk about today. Why are we trying to bring more of our secret sauce to the world? Why should you want what we've built here at Spotify? For the first why, it's because the success of Backstage has shown us that we have a lot of great lessons learned. Lessons on how to solve common software development challenges, how to reduce operational toil, and incentivize behavior change, and how to improve collaboration, transparency, and learning. We want to share them with you, and we want to build a sustainable business model that allows us to continue to do so. And why should you want what we've built? I've already touched on a few of the reasons, but it boils down to these 4 things. First, our philosophy for organizing teams. Our 450-plus squads are lean, cross-functional, and balance the polarities between autonomy and collaboration. We prioritize individual development and mobility to maximize both value for our employees and our business. Second, our attention to engineering excellence and quality. We know that strong engineering practices are the foundation of speed and agility. And the fewer technologies we are world-class on, the faster we get. Third, our belief in empowering our engineers. We give our teams the power to pick the right tools for the right job, and for the most part, we don't issue top-down mandates. Instead, we focus on incentives in our efforts to drive alignment and reduce fragmentation. And lastly, our focus on building products with empathy and a customer-centric approach. Our developers are human beings who deserve as great of an experience as our listeners and creators do. We try to ensure that tools in the Spotify platform are the right tools for the job and that we listen and adapt when they aren't. You're going to hear more from our teams today on how that secret sauce has resulted in these plugins. Plugins specifically designed to help you accelerate your developer experience goals, all within Backstage. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Austin and Meg to share more about the Spotify plugins for Backstage bundle subscription.
Hi, I'm Austin Lehman, and I lead the Backstage team at Spotify.
And I'm Meg Watson. I lead product for Backstage. We're very excited to share the Spotify plugins for Backstage bundle subscription available today.
Before we dive in, I want to come back to this concept that Tyson shared on Spotify's formula for developer effectiveness and build on it a little bit. Our hypothesis is that Spotify's business, and really any business, hinges on helping developers contribute effectively. If your developers are lost, unproductive, or unhappy, then you're not keeping pace, let alone innovating. In fact, you might be struggling to recruit and hire quickly, struggling to retain talent, or struggling to understand the health of the technology powering your company. First, let's start with familiar territory, the endless pursuit of productivity. Everyone is talking about productivity. The work of improving productivity is never done. It's an always-on activity, and it matters across all levels of decision makers and contexts, because every ounce of productivity is $1 saved and a happier teammate. Productivity is the rate of output per unit of input. In the simplest sense, for developers, this means they need to do less work to build better products. At Spotify, our developer experience teams are obsessed with figuring out how to get developers to do less in order to get a given job done. And we do that in a few ways. First, we invest deeply in research to ensure our decisions at all levels are based on a real understanding of the challenges our developers are experiencing. We've taken the patterns used to study, understand, and connect with our consumer fans and applied those to developers, treating them as customers. And it doesn't stop there. Design is central to experience. We embed designers across our squads to ensure we build beautiful, intuitive tools that people want to use. Lastly, we do a lot of internal marketing and evangelization, like a lot. This is crucial because we typically don't mandate adoption, but instead try to incentivize by promoting the best supported, clearest, and easiest way of doing something. But that's the easy part. What's this happiness stuff about? We believe that measures of effectiveness need to take into account much more of what impacts the thing at the center of the developer experience, the person. Because at the end of the day, building and shipping code is a human-intensive process. So happiness might feel like a fluffy metric, but in the time we've been focusing on it at Spotify, we've come to find that we get good signals on effectiveness by examining the answer to more squishy, human-like questions. Do people feel empowered to do their best work? Is their energy being applied in healthy ways to both their own goals and the company's goals? Is it easy to innovate, experiment, and try new things? So we've been on a multi-year journey to optimize this particular formula for success, and we've learned quite a bit along the way. It's an approach that we deeply believe in because it has helped us address tough challenges like employee morale, stress and burnout, and other factors that can contribute to poorer quality and high turnover in the long term. And what we've seen time and again is that Backstage is serving as that same kind of change catalyst for our adopters within the open source community, which is why we're doubling down on our commitment by sharing some of the best things we've built so far in a commercial offering.
Our goal has always been pretty simple. We want to make Backstage the standard by unlocking developer effectiveness for organizations of every size, scale, and industry. We believe our insights and tools are transferable and can be equally valuable to you. That's why Backstage is an open source platform and why Spotify is continuing to support the community and contribute to the project. Last year, when we first shared our intent to commercialize products for Backstage, we talked about how we've only just begun tapping into the potential of Backstage and sharing all that it has done for us at Spotify. Today, we're diving deeper on the next step on that journey with the release of Spotify plugins for Backstage, a paid subscription available to all Backstage adopters. We're launching with a set of 5 plugins that address different aspects of developer experience and engineering culture. We developed this bundle with feedback from a core group of customers. Now that the tires have been kicked, we're ready to open up the beta testing to our broader community. The bundle subscription includes 2 kinds of plugins: external versions of some of the most popular homegrown plugins we've relied on for years at Spotify, and new plugins specifically created to unlock more value for companies using Backstage. These plugins leverage key features of the Backstage platform. Its role as a central hub for all of your engineering teams, where they do their everyday work. Its role as a 2-sided platform that creates data-driven feedback loops between your platform teams and your feature teams to continuously strengthen and improve your internal developer community. And the streamlined UX that reduces complexity and makes it so easy to use. Although the plugins have diverse functionality, the cohesive interface of Backstage makes them feel familiar and easy to adopt. The plugins included in the bundle are aimed at enhancing Backstage usability, driving adoption, solving ownership, driving best practices, improving visibility and decision-making, and facilitating collaboration. We've used internal versions of these plugins for years, with hundreds or even thousands of Spotifyers using them daily. And we've leveraged this feedback to improve the experience through ongoing iteration. In other words, they're battle-tested here at Spotify before your teams get to them. We think they're ready for the outside world. Soundcheck helps you ensure that all of your software is built to the engineering standards that you expect at your organization, while making it easy for all of your engineers to know about and follow those standards. Skill Exchange is a great way to expand the abilities of your entire R&D community by ensuring that your developers are always learning, always motivated, and always collaborating on something fun, exciting, and critical to your business. And Pulse lets you keep track of it all, helping you understand and measure the feelings and experiences of your team and capitalizing on ways to improve the health of your organization over the long term. It'll tell you if your developers really are happy, which is where we started today. In other cases, we listened to the community on enterprise features they needed to make Backstage more powerful and easier to adopt. Role-based access control is an out-of-the-box solution to control access and data within your Backstage instance. And Insights helps you measure usage of Backstage within your organization so you can have visibility into how adoption is really working. There's no one way to improve developer effectiveness. Each of these plugins does its part, and we use all of these plugins collectively in that effort. As such, we're packaging these plugins as a bundle, providing everything we think and hear that you need to successfully improve the productivity and happiness of your developers.
As you might have guessed, we love a freemium model at Spotify. These plugins are designed to complement the open source platform and plugins you already enjoy, bringing even more of Spotify's experience and maturity with Backstage to the overall platform. We firmly believe these plugins, combined with the innovation that we've seen across hundreds of adopting companies, will help you take your developers to the next level. We've talked a lot about the Backstage plugin architecture and what makes it so valuable in an open source context. Plugins are really any functionality that makes your Backstage app more useful. They can be bespoke to an organization or open source, and their benefits shared by many. At Spotify, the inner source plugin contribution and ownership model that Backstage fosters helps us achieve our developer experience goals in a Spotify way. Instead of working against our culture, we work with it by creating a marketplace of now over 200 internal Backstage plugins where developers contribute solutions addressing common problems they have, and others can adopt them too. The same model applies for the Spotify plugin subscription. We've built these plugins so that you don't have to, in an effort to replicate that virtuous cycle. This initial bundle and everything to come in the future is the very best of what our team at Spotify envision, builds, and iterate on every day. We want you and your teams to move faster and for Backstage to be stickier and more impactful within your organization by drawing on our experience so you don't have to replicate work that we've already done.
As Austin mentioned, our investment with Backstage is following suit with our consumer offerings. In this case, the subscription is meant to enhance what's already available in open source. The overarching question we asked when developing these plugins was, will this make Backstage more powerful and useful for open source adopters? And that's the question we'll continue to ask as we evolve the subscription. We hope that by adding paid plugins from Spotify to the other commercial services surrounding Backstage, that the platform becomes more valuable to current adopters, that will broaden its reach to new adopters, and that will also create a more diverse ecosystem for the community at large.
The bundle subscription is also how we see Spotify continuing to sustain its investment in Backstage. Revenue generated from the bundle can be reinvested into developing and releasing more plugins, and including more of the plugins we use internally, and evolving Backstage further. If you look across the open source ecosystem, the largest, healthiest, and most impactful projects are all enhanced by commercial offerings. These offerings demonstrate long-term commitment, and in this case, they demonstrate Spotify's enduring commitment to Backstage. We see this as a good thing for our community, for our teams, and our customers.
We are structuring pricing as an annual subscription with customers gaining access to all 5 plugins offered in the bundle. Alongside the plugins themselves, customers can also expect ongoing technical support and help getting the paid plugins up and running when they buy the bundle. In our alpha and closed beta testing, we learned that pricing flexibility based on individual parameters like Backstage usage and capacity within an organization is what works best for our customers. In this open beta period, we're committed to building relationships with our customers and demonstrating that commitment by building ongoing value with the subscription. And now, we'd like to introduce you to some of the builders of each of these plugins. They'll share how these plugins have helped developers at Spotify and how they can help your developers too.
Hi, my name is Eileen Nazario, and I'm an engineer on the Soundcheck team at Spotify. As a totally impartial observer, I think Soundcheck is probably one of the most impactful Backstage plugins we've created at Spotify. Soundcheck was created with a vision to promote engineering excellence through clear scorecards, actionable feedback, and positive reinforcement, thereby improving developer experience and leading to faster releases. It fundamentally changed the health of our technology ecosystem. Quite literally, Soundcheck is how we drew a straight line between an individual developer's decision-making for their components to our top-line goals for engineering excellence and quality. Just by showing our developers opportunities to improve our tech health, we've driven significant decreases in technology fragmentation. And this consistency makes everyone at Spotify more productive. Our belief is that the external Soundcheck plugin can bring that value to you too, by enabling you to codify your own organization's development best practices and operational standards. First, by providing a framework for measuring and aggregating the health of components across an organization. And second, by visualizing checks for security, testing, reliability, and other needed tech health programs. With the Soundcheck plugin, developers can see how well their components measure up to engineering best practices and standards at a glance. And as we've proven out at Spotify, seeing leads to doing. When owners can easily see the tech health of their components, it incentivizes quality, reliability, and alignment throughout your software ecosystem. A little background on how Soundcheck came to be. For years, Spotify has used the concept of the golden path to make developers onboarding easier and encourage standardization. Each engineering discipline has a golden path, which is the recommended set of technologies and patterns you can use to build out new components. The golden path provides the best supported, easiest way to build something new. Our golden paths help us defragment our tech ecosystem, reduce total complexity, and also allows us to automate migration of our software fleet more easily. However, they only affect the starting point of each component. In a healthy ecosystem of software components, many components will routinely be maintained for years. So, how do we encourage standardization of a component as it evolves, and even as the standards themselves evolve? That's where the golden state comes in. The golden state is a quantifiable and actionable list of criteria that measures alignment to the golden path. It is a short list of how to take any component back onto the golden path. And most importantly, it's an implicit promise to software developers that if they align with the golden state, they not only get a bunch of stuff for free like security, scalability, observability, but that as we upgrade, they won't have to worry about that. Our platform teams will manage them moving forward. The Soundcheck plugin was born out of a need for our developers to self-assess how they were doing against these concepts. You likely have your own version of golden state at your company, but that's just one thing you can measure. With Soundcheck, you can map any program, which we define as a set of operational standards or a long-term tech health initiative you might have. At Spotify, we have programs related to security, testing, reliability, and are working on many more to come. Let's take test certified as an example. Our initial goal was to get test flakiness below 10%. Since then, flakiness has dropped to below 1%, which shows the power of just putting relevant data in front of smart engineers. We help them measure it, and what we find is that's enough. They do the rest. Our success here can really be traced back to that Spotify secret sauce we've been talking about. At its heart, Soundcheck is a tool that incentivizes behavior change in an effort to make everyone just a little bit happier. At Spotify, no one is forced to align to the golden state or to get their components test certified. There is no one telling you as a developer that you have to do it. However standardization and best practices happen at your company, Soundcheck allows your infrastructure teams to be teachers and advocates for feature teams instead of mandate enforcers. On the flip side, if you do have regulatory requirements or compliance needs that aren't so optional, Soundcheck includes an API that you can use to verify that components are meeting the standards you need to meet. Let's dive into how the plugin works. The Soundcheck tab on the component page shows the Soundcheck programs that are applicable for the active component in the tabs across the top. Each Soundcheck program is a collection of levels, and each level consists of one or more checks. Each check can have rich content associated with it, which provides an opportunity to sell the value of the check and convince engineering teams to spend time getting it to pass, and also to provide any relevant documentation to make it easy for them to do so. When a check is failing, you can also provide details of the reason for that failure so that the underlying cause can be addressed efficiently. As an example, let's say we just merged changes to this component to increase its code coverage to above the threshold for this check. As you submit updated check results to Soundcheck, we will see the state of this check change from failed to passed. Now that the coverage has increased above the threshold, the check is now showing a green check mark, and the progress bar for its level has moved one step closer to being complete. However, we still have more to do in order to complete the entire level. As you can see, we still have a failing check. The component is missing metadata defining its lifecycle in the Backstage catalog. If we again merge a change which adds this metadata and updated check results are pushed to Soundcheck, the has component lifecycle defined check will pass too. This component is now sequentially passing all checks at levels 1, 2, and 3 in this program. So we get a full green bar, confetti everywhere, and now we have a fully certified Q proxy. The badge has been updated to show level 3 certification. The Soundcheck view on this component page helps focus closely on evaluating and improving a single component. But what about when a broader view is needed? That's where the Soundcheck overview page comes in. This page provides a bird's eye view of how well a collection of components is aligned to your organization's operational and development standards. This page also provides a glanceable view of compliance for each program and helps to highlight checks that might need attention across multiple components in your org. Now that we've covered the user experience, let's talk a little bit about Soundcheck programs themselves. Soundcheck programs are tightly coupled to your own organization's operational and development standards. We provide some example programs along with Soundcheck, but the real power comes from creating your own programs to codify these standards. Programs are defined in YAML as part of the Backstage configuration. You can define as many programs as you'd like, and Soundcheck includes the ability to filter both programs and the checks within them, so you can make sure that developers only see programs and checks that make sense for each of their components. In the future, we'll be exploring ways to make defining and evolving programs even easier, so watch this space. We're excited about what we've built already, but where are we going from here? First, we want to centralize as much of the work of collecting check results as possible to minimize the work required to adopt Soundcheck. Today, Soundcheck doesn't help with the work of actually performing each check and submitting it to Backstage. But that will change in short order. We'll be shipping a check running framework that handles the work of running checks within Backstage and provides systems to collect the information we need to generate check results for some common checks. This system will also be extensible so that you can add checks for any metric you're interested in with minimal effort. And we'll continue evolving and expanding this functionality by adding support for collecting more kinds of check results from third-party tools over time. Along with making it easier to collect check results, we're also looking at ways to help you leverage the power of this rich data you're collecting in Soundcheck. This data is already available via the Soundcheck GraphQL API, but we'd like to make it easy to visualize in Backstage by providing things like graphs that show the history of a check result, more powerful tools for visualizing program compliance for many components at once, and aggregated views of how program compliance is changing over time. And that's Soundcheck. So instead of asking your developers to file and respond to yet another ticket, you can instead promote software quality through clear scorecards, actionable feedback, and positive reinforcement. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to June in London to share more about our role-based access control plugin.
Hi, I'm June Park. I'm an engineer working on our commercial offerings for Backstage, and I'm here to talk to you about our role-based access control plugin. As we know, Backstage unlocks a world of possibilities for your organization by empowering everyone to easily find the information that they need. But sometimes you may not want everyone to be able to access everything. Many companies may have sensitive information stored within their systems that should not be accessible to everyone. Sometimes it makes a lot of sense to restrict certain destructive actions to a subset of users. Or maybe your organization thrives on strong team ownership and you want to codify that philosophy in your Backstage user interface. One of the things we try to do often is gather feedback from the community, particularly adopters who are further along on their journey, on what enterprise-level features would have enabled a smoother Backstage implementation. While our open source community brings so many different perspectives and organizational challenges, again and again, authorization emerged as a common need frequently requested by adopters, even an outright blocker to adoption. Earlier this year, we released the open source permission framework that allows for adopters to build many different authorization mechanisms into Backstage. Implementations like attribute-based access control, bespoke logic expressed in code, or integration with external authorization providers. Since then, it's been great to see so many developers being able to address their access control needs through this framework. But we also heard from adopters that they wanted an out-of-the-box solution that made configuration powerful yet understandable. Something that allowed them to manage access and protect their data in Backstage flexibly and easily. To be clear, the Backstage permission framework is and forever will be open source, allowing Backstage maintainers to write whatever code they need to implement access control in a way that works best for their organization. Leveraging this open-ended nature of the permission framework, we at Spotify have built a role-based access control plugin that integrates seamlessly with your existing identity providers and allows administrators at your organization to configure authorization through a no-code management UI to plugins, routes, and data within your developer portal. We built this RBAC plugin to be super intuitive. Within the interface, admins can quickly define roles, assign users and groups, and configure permissions to encode authorization decisions according to your organization's evolving security and compliance needs. We think this user-friendly RBAC plugin will make access control a breeze to implement. Let's take a look at how it works. At the heart of our RBAC plugin is the concept of a policy. Each policy defines who has access to which entities and actions. As you make changes to each policy and publish those changes, the previous versions are saved automatically for historical access and can be republished at any time. As you can see, each policy consists of one or more roles. In this case, we only have one role in our active policy, which is denying users access. This is why we're not able to see anything in our catalog. Let's change this policy to be a bit more useful. In order to make changes, we start by duplicating the active policy. This creates a draft policy, which is not yet published. This is where we'll go and make our changes. In our draft policy, we'll start simple. We'll call this policy Allow All. Let's remove this role and create a new role called Allow All that will allow everyone access to everything. We'll do this by matching all permissions and responding with allow. This will emulate the default behavior of Backstage when you have not turned on the permission framework at all. Now let's save our draft and publish our changes. As soon as I publish these changes, the new policy is now live in our Backstage instance. Now, when we navigate back to the catalog, you can see that all our components are visible. Great, but that was an extremely simplified policy. Let's try something a little bit more realistic. Let's create a new policy. This time, we're going to create a new role that can only access users and group entities. Perhaps something appropriate for an HR role. Instead of matching all permissions, we are now going to target the catalog entity read permission. Then we're going to author what we call a conditional decision. Conditional decisions allow us to make an authorization decision based on a set of criteria. The UI allows you to craft conditions of arbitrary complexity through options such as any of, all of, and negations. But we'll author a single condition this time to keep things simple. Within these conditions, we are free to utilize any of the permission rules provided to us by Backstage plugins. In our case, since we've selected the catalog entity read permission, the UI shows us all of the catalog rules at our disposal. We want to use the isEntityKind rule. We'll specify the parameter to be user and group. We'll also make this role apply to the people team. Before we save and publish, let's move this new role up so it takes precedence over our previous role. Great. Now, if we go back to the catalog, you can see that I'm only able to view users and groups. You may have noticed that there is one problem with this policy. If I were to go and create a component that is not a user or group, then I could no longer see it, even though I am the owner of that component. That doesn't seem right. Let's fix that. We'll make a new version and edit the permission that we just created. This time, we won't use a single condition. We'll use an any of in order to combine two conditions. We'll have the isEntityKind rule, just like before. But this time, we'll also add the isEntityOwner rule. The parameter for this rule is a special string that allows us to specify the user that is making the request for this entity. This also may be a good time to mention that if you're already using the permission framework with custom rules, you can use them right here, just like this. Let's save and publish our policy once again. can now see that I not only have access to users and groups, but I also have access to the components that I own. At any point, if you want to go back and publish a previous version, you can do so simply by using the previous versions table. For example, if we wanted to make the allow all policy our active policy again, all we have to do is hit publish. Or if we want to create a new draft based on any of the older versions, we can do that as well. This is just a small taste of the RBAC plugin. You can start to imagine how this UI could be used to easily craft policies that work for your organization, even if your use case may be complex. We believe RBAC can address those pressing enterprise needs for better security and compliance within Backstage. RBAC ships with a handful of other features that we haven't shown here today, such as automatic detection of stale client policies, import-export, and configurable default policies. We also have plans for even more features to be released down the road, such as improvements to the conditional decision UI and policy testing. So stay tuned for those. I'll turn it over now to Emma over in New York to talk about Insights, another plugin aimed at making Backstage more powerful for our adopters. All yours, Emma.
Hi, I'm Emma White. I'm a product marketing manager working on Backstage, and I'm excited to share more about our Backstage Insights plugin with you. Insights helps admins identify, benchmark, and understand Backstage usage trends. We built Insights to help adopters do just that, adopt. Understanding how your Backstage app is being used helps you make decisions on where to focus building your developer portal further and where you need to drive adoption to broader teams within your org. At Spotify, active users are our bread and butter, whether they're streaming music or developing software. That's why active usage metrics are front and center within Insights. We have a lot of different ways we measure Backstage success at Spotify, and we've developed a ton of benchmarks to ensure our Backstage is working well for everyone. Those run the gamut from our onboarding metrics to the total number of plugin contributions to examining trends on ease of discovery and reduced context switching. But we also look at more traditional metrics like daily active users, page views, etc., which help us understand how Backstage is being used. And that's where we started with Insights. So let's dive in and you can see what the dashboard looks like. First things first, the Insights dashboard is created through an API call to Spotify servers, which means there's one less thing you need to configure, maintain, and scale within your infrastructure. Once you've installed the plugin, we immediately start to crunch the signals it sends us, which we use to populate the dashboard with these insights. Here across the top, you'll get an overview of how many users have actively engaged with Backstage over the last week and an indication of how that compares against last week. To the right, the week is broken out by day, allowing you to pick up on potential anomalies. Insights has deep knowledge about how Backstage is organized. That's what allows us to break down usage by Backstage plugin down here, showing which plugins are driving the most engagement, whether it's software creation through the scaffolder, or management of existing software in your catalog, or exploration of documentation in your software ecosystem. You can click a plugin to drill down further into how users are engaging with that plugin in particular. Similar to the layout of the last page, across the top, you'll get a look at how many users are actively engaging with the plugin week over week and day by day. While down below, you get a look at which pages in the plugin are receiving the most attention. For example, here, it looks like web-related templates are seeing good usage, but backend templates, less so. Maybe there's room for improvement in those backend templates, or maybe there's something to be learned about how the team onboarded web engineers into Backstage that could be applied to onboarding your backend engineers. With Insights, you're armed with the information you need to make Backstage successful at your organization. And in order to keep the Insights train going, I'm going to pass it over to Kyle in London to talk about Pulse, a plugin based on one of the most powerful tools we use at Spotify to gain insight into how our engineers really feel.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyle Butner and I'm a product manager on Spotify's Platform Insights Squad. We're the team of data scientists and researchers who define, measure, and help Spotify understand developer productivity and happiness. You've heard us talk a lot about data today. specifically how much we rely on gathering the right data so that we can make informed decisions about where to invest and improve the development experience for our Spotify engineers. One way we do this is by collecting usage data across our developer experience. In other words, data about how our developers behave. That tells us loads about where our engineers are getting stuck and bogged down. But instrumenting our systems to get this data can be tricky and sometimes requires a big investment. Luckily, there's another type of data we collect that's similarly powerful: self-reported behavior data. And how do we get that? We just ask our engineers to tell us about their experience. That's where Pulse comes in. The Pulse plugin is an R&D survey framework that lets you track key self-reported productivity and satisfaction metrics, analyze anonymized response data, and visualize trends and insights, all within Backstage. Like Soundcheck, Pulse is ultimately a decision-making tool for Spotify, one that helps us determine the future of our products, how we address unmet needs, and how we build empathy, as Tyson mentioned earlier. Now, maybe you're already running a developer survey, but you're not quite sure the questions you're asking are the right ones. Or maybe teams across your organization are running many of their own surveys, leading to survey fatigue. Or perhaps you're just flying blind, which is all too common for platform teams. In any case, Pulse has the potential to transform your organization, just as it's done internally at Spotify, where it's become a foundational part of our engineering culture. At Spotify, Pulse began as an effort to get better quality data on the overall health of the R&D org, as well as answer specific questions where we had hunches about problems that needed fixing. It's now deployed on a quarterly basis to Spotify's developers, data scientists, and machine learning engineers. Prior to Pulse, our product teams would have to run their own surveys or conduct listening tours, and our central insights team would have to reach out to consolidate these findings across R&D to identify trends. Or in many cases, we'd simply go with our gut. But now that we've been running Pulse for the last 3 years at Spotify, we've noticed a few key benefits. First, it helps our teams put real values to key R&D metrics like productivity, satisfaction, and flow. Second, it helps us find ways to make R&D faster by highlighting real bottlenecks, problems, and development opportunities. Third, it helps us measure the impact of R&D investments, which is something that teams have struggled with before. And lastly, it helps us build trust within the R&D community, who see this as an opportunity to make their voices heard and see change. Pulse is unique because it focuses on the concerns of developers and other members of your tech community, telling you everything that a general HR survey can't. From what your data scientists really think about your workflow tooling, to how often your developers feel like they can achieve flow, to the most common blockers teams say they're facing. Here are a few examples of where we see the impact of Pulse across Spotify. In goal setting, Pulse data is often used as a key indicator. One of our company-level OKRs this year, for example, measured success with Pulse's perceived engineering velocity metric. It's the norm to see this data across all levels of OKR. We've also seen its impact in directing key R&D initiatives, like when we saw an acceleration of a key software migration due to issues raised in the survey. Finally, we see its impact in identifying opportunities to increase developer effectiveness, like when we identified documentation discoverability as a major issue and launched the Backstage Explore tab, which those in the open source community will know all about as a result. By helping you clearly quantify developer effectiveness through satisfaction and productivity, the Pulse plugin allows you to collect the data that you need to drive continuous improvements to your R&D tooling, processes, and culture, and ship code faster. So let's take a look at how Pulse works inside Backstage. The homepage is the starting point for survey respondents and R&D contributors interested in viewing the survey results. It pulls out key information for them at the top, like how many people have responded to the current survey, and a call to action to complete their response. You've also got the option to check out previous surveys. The homepage also gives key details about the survey methodology, process, and results data. For example, this is where we go into our policy around privacy and anonymity, which is so important to making sure developers feel safe to speak their mind. By providing context up front, survey respondents ideally understand and feel comfortable completing the survey, which promotes authentic responses and accurate insights. It's really simple to administer your Pulse surveys as well. We provide a straightforward template that lets any survey administrator or set of administrators launch a survey in seconds. All administrators need to do is choose a start and end date for the survey, then send a survey link to your participants. Pulse eliminates the need to spend time configuring the survey, questions, or user base. Just send it where it needs to go. We've also made it really simple to take the survey. Pulse survey participants take the entire survey within Backstage. The questions in Pulse are designed to collect data around certain metrics we think are key to understanding the developer experience. The core Pulse question set only takes a few minutes to complete, and it's entirely integrated into the participants' existing Backstage workflow, which means you're more likely to get the feedback you need. Finally, the Results tab displays Pulse survey results to any Backstage user once the results have been reviewed and published by the survey administrator. The results showed trends over time for core R&D metrics like productivity, flow state, and satisfaction. This helps leaders and teams across your business prioritize initiatives that will speed up R&D over the short and long term. This is just the beginning. Use Pulse to start collecting key productivity and happiness metrics using our straightforward framework, and in the coming months, we'll be rapidly iterating to expand the data collection capabilities of the plugin and the insights you can get from it. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Morgan in New York to share more about the Skill Exchange plugin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Morgan DaCosta. I'm a product manager for our collaborative learning team, and I'm definitely not biased, but I think we saved the best plugin for last. If I can borrow a little from Benjamin Franklin, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. At Spotify, the collaborative learning team's mission is to drive impactful, equitable, peer-to-peer technical learning culture within Spotify R&D, one that empowers people to work together, move faster, and innovate. My team provides the tools, learning experiences, and opportunities that unlock the potential of Spotify teams and individuals across the globe. One of the biggest examples of our work is Skill Exchange, our internal marketplace for on-the-job learning opportunities to develop and elevate homegrown knowledge and technical skills. The Skill Exchange is a powerful tool to promote a culture of self-led growth. With the rise of microservice architecture, we're seeing more developer teams operate in autonomous ways. Let's add our post-COVID reality to that picture, where employees are distributed across the globe and spending less time in person together, fostering connections and trust. Even setting aside those factors, talent, knowledge, and experience can often get trapped inside organizational silos. It's very natural for people to get into their grooves and stay there. So on one side, you could have a developer who might be feeling stagnated, but who would be eager to learn and apply new skills given the opportunity. And on the other side, you might have a team about to go through the trouble of onboarding a temporary contractor because they don't know that the help they need is right there in their own org. Skill Exchange can break those walls down to create new opportunities for learning and growth throughout your R&D community. And it's something we saw at Spotify a few years ago when we were growing our R&D organization at a breakneck pace. My team had been running what we call Tech University courses on a variety of topics, from intro-level building for iOS and Android at Spotify, all the way up to deep dives on our experimentation platform. We saw great engagement at this formal learning level, but when it came to practical application of what people had learned, we didn't have a mechanism in place to get them hooked up with the right opportunities to practice their skills. People would find opportunities to temporarily join a team that needed support or a hack project through word of mouth or Slack channels. We did some further research and found that 85% of Spotifyers who participated in those opportunities reported those experiences resulted in the development of specific applicable technical skills. At the same time, we also found that many engineers, especially new joiners, didn't know what opportunities were available since they were primarily found through personal networks and word of mouth. So my team was doing a lot of manual pairing between needs and opportunities that we'd hear about from squads we worked with. Skill Exchange started as a hack project to provide more visibility to opportunities and scale the effort to connect Spotifyers to the experiences and people that could help them build their technical skills. It was met with rave reviews across our offices. People had been craving these points of connection that were grounded in work, but social by design. And they were harder to find as we went remote and transitioned to our work from anywhere policy during the pandemic. Since Skill Exchange was deployed internally, we've seen more than 1,000 monthly active users on average, with more than 500 opportunities for engineers to temporarily join other teams, more than 200 mentorship connections, and more than 1,000 opportunities to hack on new ideas. With the Skill Exchange plugin, your R&D community can unlock opportunities for collaboration and meaningful connection, no matter where anyone sits in the org chart. Mentors can connect with mentees, teams can connect with temporary help, Developers can pair up to program together, and ad hoc teams can assemble to work on hack projects. By making it easier for your developers to discover and borrow each other's skills, both teams and individuals can learn, grow, and stretch their abilities together, leading to happier, more fulfilled, and capable devs. So let's dive in on what Skill Exchange looks like within Backstage. The homepage of the Skill Exchange is the jumping off point for you to find people and experiences to help you build your skills. The main focus is the search bar where you can enter skills to find people in your organization who can help. Behind this search is the foundation of the Skill Exchange, your skill profile. On your entity profile page, users can display skills in two ways: skills I can help with and skills I'm learning. Skills are positioned this way on purpose. We're not here to boost our egos, but rather to share our unique skill context and perspective so our colleagues can find us when they need help, and also invite others to help us develop the skills we want to learn. To add or modify your skills, select Edit Skills. Here, I'm going to update a skill that I've been learning. And I can also add a new skill. To do that, I'll select New Skill in the top right-hand corner. I'll give the skill a name and select a category, as well as my current level of understanding, and I have the opportunity to specify it as a learning goal. Then I can select Save and see it displayed on my profile. You may have noticed that even though I rated my proficiency a level 1, this appeared in skills I can help with, because we believe you can often contribute to others, even when you're learning. Now that I've updated my profile, let's see how this information is used when we do a skill search. I'll enter a search term. And once I press enter, I'll get a list of anyone who has added this skill to their profile. You can see I can also further narrow down this list by team members from a certain part of the organization. I'll also see the search results in the context of the other skills listed on a user's profile, which might help me determine who could best support me for the need that I have. Let's look at some other ways that I can find learning opportunities or get help from my colleagues, starting with embeds. On the embeds page, I can browse through a number of short-term opportunities to work on another team. I can also search for specific terms that I'm interested in. If I don't see an opportunity that matches what I'm looking for, I can also create a notification, which will save this search and send me Slack notifications with a direct link if any new posts match my saved criteria. Basically, a user can set it and forget it and let Skill Exchange do the search work for them. Once I find an embed I'm interested in, clicking into the card, I'm able to see some additional information to learn more and decide if this is an opportunity that I want to pursue. There's some description information, the opportunity to review some links, and some important details about when and how long the embed is expected to be. If I want to contact the post owner, selecting Contact will allow me to send a message to the post owner, letting them know I'm interested in learning more about the embed opportunity. On to the next section of the tool, Mentor. So the Mentor page, search, and cards are similar to embeds, except they are grouped by the type of post, which is one of 3 options: offering to mentor, looking for a mentor, or looking to pair. The search works in the same way, and you can turn on notifications for search as well. If you open a card, you can see some very similar information and actions as with embeds. Overall, the cards for Mentor are simple on purpose. What we found from feedback is that people want to determine the level of detail they request or offer mentorship. In some cases, users are very specific about what they're looking for, and other times it's more open-ended with some broader themes. Let's take a look at the flow to create a post, and you'll see that you're prompted to select what objective you want upfront. And then there's some simple fields to build your requests. So you can offer a very detailed explanation or again, be as broad as you wish to be. The last and maybe the most fun part of the Skill Exchange is the Hacks section. On the Hacks tab, you can see a list of all the hacks within your organization. These are searchable, include a number of different criteria that you can use to filter and view hacks. When you open a hack, you'll see all the users who are collaborating on the hack, any comments from other users, the status of the hack, whether you're looking for new team members, you're in progress, complete, or your efforts resulted in a dumpster fire, users can help other org members understand where the hack is right now. You also have the ability to follow a hack and receive updates about how it progresses. You can see this hack is also associated with a larger event, Hack Week 2023. We'll get more into that in just a second. But there's also a clear identification of skills needed so others know if their skills might help move the hack idea along. Finally, similar to embeds and hacks, you have the opportunity to let the hack owner know that you're interested in contributing, which will again send a message in Slack for you. All right, so going back to hack events, we have this separate section where you can group hacks together. Here at Spotify, we have a global hack week once a year where we see over 300 hacks happening in the span of 1 week. But we also have smaller hack events happening at different levels of the organization all the time, and often running on a recurring basis. Creating an event is a great way to group these hacks and even inspire people to hack on strategic topics across the organization. When you create an event, you can also create voting sessions to provide more visibility to the hacks that are getting a lot of excitement. Even when hacks are completed, they live in the skill exchange as an archive of work. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. Having seen firsthand every hack week a Spotifyer wanting to hack on a new social listening feature, instead we can provide a record of the work that's already explored so users can connect with people and the work they may have already done and find new and exciting ways to innovate and build off those ideas and lessons learned. And that's the end of this demo. Thanks for checking out Skill Exchange. This is just the beginning. We have so many new features and functionality in store that we've tested internally and can't wait to share with you. Things like manager views, expanded skill support, and integration with formal learning activities like training courses. Now I'm going to hand it back over to Tyson for a chat with some amazing Backstage adopters.
You've been hearing a lot about Spotify's plans for Backstage. But we also want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to hear from the community. So we're really lucky today to have a number of people from our community who've been adopters here to talk about their experiences with the Backstage platform and how they've tuned it to improve the developer experience in their particular companies. I'm joined by Guillermo Manzo from Expedia Group, from Boyan Vasiliev from Bank of the West, from Jason Miller from Booz Allen Hamilton, and last but not least, Nate Axel from TELUS. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Before we get into the questions, I'd love to hear from each of you a little bit about what your company does, what your role is there, what's sort of top of mind for developer experience at your company, and in particular, why did you choose to adopt Backstage? So why don't we just start from left to right?
All right. Again, as you said, my name is Guillermo Manzo, engineering leader within EGDX org under Expedia Group. Our team is responsible for supporting 6,000 plus developers across EG. We own the Backstage platform, end-to-end, the core platform. And our main focus is around ship on day one, reduce context switching, increasing search relevancy, and technical documentation reach. And we leverage Backstage as our developer front door to do that. A couple of the key plugins we've been able to launch is our security platform, hosted all within Backstage, our reliability platform, as well as EG's travel platform, Open World, which is responsible for providing foundational capabilities to third-party developers building travel experience products.
That's a lot of experience that you have with Backstage, and we're going to get into that.
Awesome, thank you.
Fantastic. Boyan, tell us a little bit about your company, yourself, your role, and why you adopted Backstage.
Absolutely. My name is Boyan Vasiliev. I work for Bank of the West, which is a mid-sized regional bank here in the US. We're mostly on the West Coast. And we're part of BNP Paribas, which is one of the largest banks in the world. We have a ton of technology. As a bank, our main goal for the technology is always to service our customers, but also keep their data and their records really, really safe and protected. So there is a lot of emphasis on security, compliance, things like that. And we have to navigate those areas and also be able to ship code faster. When I started Bank of the West, I started with a DevOps platform team. We bought a lot of DevOps tools online to help people both stay compliant and also ship code fast. And we found that we really need to help them with the adoption of those tools. And another big part of why we chose to also kick off a developer experience team is that we have to navigate a lot of different processes, a lot of other teams that we interact with. We did a design thinking workshop with developers, and we found out that the biggest problem they have is they don't know how to get going, or they don't know how to get unstuck somewhere along those processes. So we're on our way to build a developer platform when Backstage was donated to CNCF, and we looked at it and we loved it right away. We know all of Spotify. We know how great a company that is. We also internally try to model our culture after Spotify. So it's not just the tribes and the squads and everything else, but how we do, how we operate internally with our repositories, how we have domains and multiple people can contribute to a domain and things like that. So we thought that the principles around Backstage is built would also fit our culture. So that's why we chose Backstage.
As I heard you talking there, you are already reflecting things that are quite common in Spotify culture and approach. You did the workshops with the developers, like really focusing on them and understanding them. So that's a fantastic way to get started with Backstage. Jason.
Sure. So as Tyson said, my name is Jason Miller. I'm at Booz Allen Hamilton. Booz Allen is primarily working with the federal government. We work all across the government landscape. We have three market sectors: civilian services, national security, and global defense. And we have engineering teams spread out throughout those sectors. Thousands of engineers working on hundreds of projects across dozens of federal agencies. And when we looked at the work that we did, we started seeing that there are a lot of really common building blocks that our engineers need for every project. A good example, authentication. We found we're pretty much recoding authentication on every project, but the underlying code is pretty much the same. So why aren't we intersourcing this? Why aren't we reusing it? It's an opportunity. So we developed a product called Software Studio. I'm the lead product manager on Software Studio, which is a full stack software development ecosystem for accelerating consistent and repeatable modern software development practices. And that's great. It's really important. We've seen extreme results with it very quickly. But there was a missing piece, and that was the developer experience. If something isn't easy to use, it's not going to get used. So we started looking at developer portals. And we were really looking for something that is a single pane of glass that had the holistic experience for a dev, everything that they needed in one place so they could minimize context switching. And that led us to discover Backstage, which has a lot of differentiating factors that some competitors don't, that are important not just for us, but for our clients. That includes the plugin architecture, extensibility, customization. This is really big because we can build a developer portal that's one size fits most, but our client missions are all unique in their contexts. So we need to be able to extend that capability. We need to be able to be flexible so that we can meet their needs no matter what. So when we're building this, we need to break down these silos. And the silos between our development teams arise kind of naturally because we're extremely client-focused. And that's great. We should be client-focused. We're doing great work for our clients, and they deserve great work. But we still need to remove those barriers to collaboration. When we're building the developer portal, we see that happen kind of almost in real time with contributions, right? We had our internal launch. We're drinking our own Kool-Aid here. We're beta testing it, making sure that it has the effect that we want before we bring it to our clients. And already we have roughly 25% of our internal target audience using this for internal use cases. That's prototyping. It's strategic investments, it's proposal responses, which often require real solutions to be built. And it's even a training program, which is not something that we really predicted when we first started building Software Studio and started building the developer portal. So we've already seen it outgrow what we initially envisioned for it, which is really great. Our mission on Software Studio is to get this into the hands of every Booz Allen engineer, inculcate it as a part of their daily life, and really change the way that Booz Allen does software development internally and for our clients.
Yeah, I mean, what you said about it being sort of a learning platform for the organization really resonates, I think, with, of course, our company, because it is precisely that, and it probably resonates with a lot of other users. Nate?
So I'm Nate Axel. I work for TELUS Communications. It is a telecom in Canada. TELUS has been steadily becoming more of a digital company. Traditionally, it was a retail company focused entirely on store-based transactions. Our journey into the digital world has been a quick and rapid one. So as such, the team growth that we've had has been sort of, maybe call it Wild West.
Yep. I know the feeling.
Yeah. So we realized that there was a lot of things that were happening. One was that information and knowledge typically was stored within senior developers. And so your onboarding experience greatly depended on which team you were on and who you knew, rather than it being a sort of very thought out, planned process.
Yep.
So we looked at Backstage as a way to sort of mitigate that. We focused mostly on documentation to begin with, but as we started diving into the platform, we realized as well that we could also use it for the software catalog, which is what was the primary focus for it. And that actually solves a lot of our problems as well, because one of the other problems that we have is that knowing who wrote a piece of software sometimes was a problem for us. We didn't necessarily know who to contact if something went wrong.
Yep.
So we chose Backstage primarily because it is an open source software, and part of our initiative as well is to dive further into open source and be able to be a contributor back. So.
What you just said, I could have talked to any engineer in Spotify that's been around for 10 years. They would have said the exact same thing. That's completely our journey. So it's super familiar. And then, Backstage came out of that. So before we get into specific questions, I'd love to hear from any of you or all of you a little bit on how you are approaching this ownership question, because you brought up ownership. So let's just start with the ownership of Backstage. Like, who owns Backstage inside of your organization? And then taking that a step further, how do you think about encouraging and driving other folks to adopt the different plugins and contribute to the ecosystem? Anybody want to step up on that? Yeah,
I can keep going. Yeah. So my team specifically, I guess, would own the Backstage implementation. We focused around the core setup of it. The nice thing about it, though, is that we haven't really had to sell it a whole lot in terms of inner sourcing plugin development. We've kind of shopped it around in our own internal demos and kind of shared our vision of what we want to do with the platform, and other teams have just picked up right on it. We've already got a bunch of other teams that are starting to develop their own plugins and for internal use. But we're also heavily focused in trying to push people towards open source as well. So while we do have a lot of inner source contribution, we want people to have open source, think open source first before you go inner source. We're trying to keep the inner sourcing primarily towards stuff that obviously can't be open sourced, right?
Yep. Guillermo, you were telling me a little bit in advance of our talk that this is a pretty interesting topic within Expedia Group. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so in regards to the ownership of Backstage, my team within EGDX owns the Backstage implementation. EGDX itself owns the first-party developer experience and journey, right? And also the program around what we call the Common Developer Toolkit, which started with around 300 tools that we're trying to reduce, kind of like in a tech radar, trying to reduce the amount of tool sets we're paying for and using and the redundancy. And part of that came from the proof of value metrics that we created, which was reduced context switching. And for us, reduced context switching is really focused around how we can, centralize all the different common developer tools and the core capabilities of those tools into one developer front door, right? And that's what Backstage is. So the plugin contribution model, which we were not expecting to become the bread and butter of Backstage for us, really took off. It really took off because when we first started, we kind of looked at it Backstage a little bit earlier than most people did. So we did notice that the plugin architecture was really solid, and it really allowed people individual plugins could be contributed to, which means people don't have to touch the core platform to contribute to their plugin. And we took that and sold that through automated the creation of plugins, automated the standard governance of it, put in baseline protections and use cases, and continuously worked with Spotify on understanding that plugin architecture. And because of that, we were able to drive, confidence within EG. And we started with a critical area for almost any company, which is security. So by getting security to working directly with security, to build a first set of capabilities within Backstage to prove their value, prove that they can centralize all the different fragmented security areas into one location, and then use them as a use case for other developers to build their own plugins. Right? It's still an ongoing mission. However, we've already got 20 plus common developer tools integrated, especially our core CI/CD capabilities and onboarding capabilities. And because of that, we've effectively been able to continuously sell that piece, the plugin contribution model, to developers. And once they hook in with that plugin contribution model, they're usually enticed to do the rest, right? So your plugin gets onboarded into the catalog. You can go look at your catalog. Now you're excited about the catalog, and you're realizing all the services you built to service that plugin are also in that catalog as well.
That actually really resonates with our contribution model at Booz Allen, because we have two ownership models, like internal and external, because
right.
we have to have a different ownership model for our clients, and we envision that being for their entire IT portfolio. But we're a single Scrum team that's building Backstage in our organization, right? And you can't. You said like you're shifting the onus off of the core team, right? Because this plugin contribution model through externalized repos or packages or whatever it is, that empowers your clients, whoever they may be, to get their work done without having to rely on your team to do it for them. That's super duper powerful.
Right. But one thing they do rely on us on is accountability. So we are responsible for holding plugin owners accountable for their customers. So plugin owners are our customers, and then indirectly their customers are ours as well, right? So yes, in our case, it's all internal, but because we have to govern them, we do put a lot of effort into the feedback engine. We do put the ship on day one to ensure they can build those plugins quickly, or they can iterate and push code quickly. And then when you think about the DevOps readiness assessment, the DORA metrics, right, lead time. Right, so we really do focus on trying to improve the DevOps aspects of a plugin developer's journey, and we put a lot of, although we put the onus on them to be responsible for their code, we put the onus on us to be responsible for the reliability of those plugins.
Yeah. What strikes me about this conversation so far is there's a lot of commonality, but I also heard some differences in the journey. So you're talking about security being one of the first things you tackled. It was actually one of the later things that we tackled at Spotify. So there's like different value propositions. Boyan, as you were sort of reflecting on what the others were saying, was there anything different or similar in the approach?
Yeah, absolutely. We're one team, Scrum team, supporting the core platform. Right, we're a little further behind. We haven't really built any custom plugins yet. We're working on our first one right now. But when we adopted Backstage, we spoke with the developers. I was super excited about self-track templates, right? That was my thing, or the catalog. I want to push the button and get a new app. But when we talked to them, what they really want was documentation. And I was like, oh, okay. We'll give you what you want. You have to, right?
I was a tech writer. I feel this in my soul.
I'm sorry. I'm a developer, so we just push the button, things happen. But we decided to give them what they wanted, right? So we started with tech docs, and in our ownership model was that we own the platform, obviously, but every team would own their own tech docs, and they can contribute to Backstage their own tech docs. And we had some pretty good wins already with that. And we are looking to build towards the plugin model and have other team kind of present whatever shared capabilities they have to the developer through plugins in Backstage. The developer has to go to one place.
Right. So Nate mentioned how they're sort of interacting both on inner source and open source. I'm curious a little bit about how each of your organizations is approaching and contributing to the open source community.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick that off. So in regards to open source, we actually made our first open source contribution. It was a small doc fix just to prove out that we could do it in August 2020. And from there, we've essentially consistently contributed to open source, really focused around search and filtering, core capabilities, bug fixes. And then we, towards the end of, if I'm correct, towards the end of 2021, we were able to collaborate with Spotify and actually launch the search modal that we open sourced. So what we try to do is we try to align our roadmap, right, our internal needs, right? We go and see if the open source has that available, or if there is customization opportunities that we could provide. So it's really kind of a consistent, I wouldn't call it build versus buy, but rather internal contribution versus external contribution. So the core team owns that process. So we decide what we are going to contribute, but we definitely encourage the community, right? So if engineer X wants to contribute something that's not, in the core, there's nothing stopping you. That's the whole point of Backstage being open source. You can contribute that, and that's going to come into us in a ways through an upgrade, right? So that's kind of how we handle the open source model, right? And we definitely do consistently collaborate with Spotify to align on core needs. And then internally, it's really, again, it's just the plugin contribution model is kind of how we hold the internal process there, where people contribute to their plugins. They make because it's not core, they can basically build anything within the storybook, right, within mature UI. We then go and recognize the different capabilities, like a team had built RBAC before we built RBAC, right, because RBAC's still in process. So then we can go and understand how they built RBAC and discuss with them and see what we can do to leverage that, and then discuss with Spotify on opportunities and collaboration and whatnot. So I think it's just a revolving feedback engine that we take there, and more or less the core team is kind of decision-making on the core capabilities that we contribute.
Yep. Any other thoughts on the open source contributions?
I'll go last if you guys have anything to add.
One will be quick. We haven't contributed yet. We're still a very early adopter. We're just now at the end of enabling the core plugins that we wanted to really use. But we're definitely looking forward to supporting the community. Is phenomenal. We have a lot of interactions either on Discord or on GitHub, and we can't wait to do our part to help move the community forward.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I was going to mention about that is that the nice part about being part of the open source community is that we kind of sort of roadmapped what we wanted to improve on Backstage. And because we are a small team and we're only one team, some of that stuff was kind of pushed into the far future. But then we noticed that as we were building our improvements and aiming towards having open source contributions for those improvements, a lot of the stuff that we had further down the roadmap were actually being done by other people. And so then we just got those, we were able to scratch those off our roadmap and then focus more on improving the stuff that we've already built or moving on to the next one. So,
yeah, and as you sort of think about this as well, RBAC was something that Guillermo brought up, but in particular with Booz Allen Hamilton, you were sort of an early adopter of some of this RBAC work. You've been testing the plugin, you've been part of the alpha. I'd love to hear a little bit more about your experience with this particular capability.
Sure. So we already knew we were going to have to do RBAC. It was table stakes. Yep. And there are a lot of reasons why, but you mentioned security earlier. There's a reason we put sec into DevSecOps. It's kind of a big deal. Because of that, as I said, it was table stakes. We cannot deprioritize that. And just as we're trying to figure out, where are we going to fit this in? Because one Scrum team changing the course of software development for an entire company and the government, we're never going to get to everything we need to get to. And then Spotify comes in and the Backstage team says, hey, we got this RBAC plugin. Do you want to alpha test it? And first we're like, okay, be cool. Yeah, we're interested. And it's like, it was one of those things where I tried not to jump out of my shoes. And It was a really great experience. The team was responsive and open and collaborative the entire time. We had engineering meetings so we could get some FaceTime and talk out problems, going back and forth on Slack to troubleshoot smaller issues. And the end result was like, this is months worth of work that we don't have to do directly, which, Nate, you were talking about this too. That moved up our launch timeline by multiple quarters.
But it seems like you've had quite a bit of ROI already with and saving costs, the engineering cost of developing this RBAC. So that's super awesome to hear. That's one of the key things.
And that's
one of the key
idea.
things that we are interested in our leaders taking a look at, so they can make some solid decisions around these beta plugins, right?
Yeah. So you brought up the ROI elephant. Like, this is a really important part of developer productivity, and it's sometimes hard to justify. You've shared actually your approach on a blog post on our site. Would love to hear a little bit more about that. How do you think about the sort of proof of value from Backstage and reason about ROI?
Sure, yeah. So yeah, I think the blog we did was in 2021, focused around the 4 key metrics that we're gonna kick off proof of value for Backstage. And I think I mentioned them earlier during the intro, which was search relevancy, documentation reach, reduce context switching. I think one of the most important ones, which is ship on day one. Before Backstage, we already had multiple portals that we had. Expedia Group had purchased many brands throughout the years, so they competed against each other, different portals, different processes, and that means different onboarding, as one of y'all have already called out. Because of that, it took about 4 to 6 weeks to, as a new hire, to join the company, learn what's going on, find who your friends are that's going to give you that faster access, because maybe there's not a doc, or the doc lives somewhere else, or it's copy pasted, and then from there, it's really stressful, right? Like, when you're going to get to code, when you're going to get to do your actual job. So we launched a program called Hello World with our Expedia Group learning team, and we use Backstage template, scaffolder templating, to build a paved road template that allows you to click a button in Backstage, right, and launch an end-to-end web app that you could actually go to the URL of that web app and post to LinkedIn that you have already been able to deploy code into our production platform. So we launched that with our cohorts in January 2022, and we got rave reviews at the 90+% success rate from first try. Everybody was able to successfully do it. Got great feedback, and we used that Hello World template to provide more confidence to Common Developer Toolkit owners to integrate into Backstage. So all the tools that, like in regards to CI/CD, catalog registry, right, and that lifecycle process, by clicking on that one template, we were able to go from 4 to 6 weeks to 1 day.
We had similar effects. Like that was the entire reason behind Software Studio, taking the bootstrapping process and bringing it from multiple months in some cases, and now it's like, click a button, go get coffee, come back, oh, here's my platform.
Absolutely, right.
Boyan, I think you have integrated your CI/CD approach into Backstage, but I want to take this sort of template value thing and take it to the sort of another step, which is, I believe you've implemented the golden path concept as well. I'd love to hear more about why you did that and what's the value proposition that you have in that.
Absolutely, we did borrow the golden path idea from Spotify. We thought it was great. Heavy regulated environment we're working in, so there is a lot of things you need to do before you put an application in production, much more than everywhere else. You have to interact with a lot of teams, and they all have their own way of working. One team has a SharePoint site, one team has a Confluence wiki, a third team has their instructions in GitLab, and so forth. And we do want to get to the place where these guys are when you click a button and all of these things are satisfied, and we're working towards it. But where the value was for us immediately was really documenting the golden path and having maybe 26 or 18 steps, depending on whether you're building an application from scratch in-house or you're deploying a vendor product, which we have a lot of at the bank. And going in order, here is where you start, and link to documentation that another team has that you may need. In the place where the documentation was not there, we put it into Backstage. But as an engineer, you have a path of deploying software at the bank, and you know who to talk to, you know how to interface with them, and it really helped people just stop banging their head against the wall, because they go somewhere for questions, for answers, and they're like, hey, you need this. Well, where do I get it? Well, I don't know. It's not me, but you need it. We can't proceed without having this thing. We put all of that in order for them, so they can easily navigate our processes.
Well, that's awesome. So if I'm correct, you're using Scaffolder and Tech Docs to essentially provide your golden path for developers?
Yeah, mostly the Tech Docs at the moment, and we are working on building templates where we want to interface with everybody. We need to interface with like security, infrastructure, audit compliance, and have all of these good practices like RBAC and everything else just built into the template, right? When you build an API, you're always going to secure it, right? You don't want developers to have to worry about writing the security of the API. You want them to worry about writing the business value of the API and everything else that we need, right? So we do have the security, we have the data protection, just like you. We're very, very heavy on keeping our data safe. It's not a fun thing to do, but it's an absolute necessity.
Yeah.
And we want to be able to have that and have developers focus their time on building fun stuff that they enjoy doing, that drive ultimately the business value.
So Backstage sounds like many different journeys on the way there. Some of you are earlier and later, but Nate, in particular, TELUS was one of the very early adopters of Backstage, and early adoption is not always a fun thing. Sometimes it's challenging. I would love to hear a little bit about your journey as an early adopter. What were some of the road bumps on the way? And then how have things evolved since then? Let's just start with that.
So as I mentioned earlier, our core focus at the beginning was around having a centralized place for documentation. So the Tech Docs integration was key for us. When we first started off with it, we took Backstage, we're like, this is great, and it has a bunch of things that we want, and then we kind of went way off into the customization land, and we didn't really have a strong focus around open source contribution at the beginning. So what ended up happening was that we really struggled with maintaining that balance between what we had customized and what was coming from the open source community. And over the year of our initial early adoption, we found that it was getting harder and harder to integrate with some of this great value that was being created in the open source community. It was also getting harder to maintain our version of Backstage because it was customized. And so about a year in, we actually hit the reset button. We threw out our original version of the platform and created a new one, focused around being with the core of Backstage and focused on, instead of customizing things for our own needs, wherever possible, we try to contribute to the core or just stick close to the core of Backstage.
I think the community very much appreciates that.
Yeah, and so as such, there's, I think probably the biggest one that we contributed was the Dynatrace plugin. We noticed that we were switching actually from New Relic to Dynatrace and noticed there wasn't a plugin. We very much also like to we're aiming for that single pane of glass that you mentioned earlier. And having that plugin was kind of centralized or core to what we needed. And so, we've completely switched our approach to how we maintain the product and the plugins that we create for it. So,
yeah.
In regards to I think your question revolved around kind of the level of difficulty contributing to open source. And I think in the early on, since there really wasn't. Y'all were just starting, right? This Backstage itself was still being ramped up. Really, there wasn't real expectation that things would be, really quick when it comes to contributing. I think there was a lot of great direct conversation and direct, even some hand-holding needed so that way we could get some stuff through. But as time progressed over the years, I feel like the contribution model for open source has really grown in a way that, we could kind of easily recognize what it takes to, become a maintainer, right? Or what does it take to become, that second level to get those PR reviews and whatnot. I would say our struggle as a larger company is dedicating right? That resourcing, that one resource of those two people to do just contributions. So we've more or less settled with a swarming technique in conversations with Spotify. But for the most part, I would say that the contribution model itself is fairly straightforward. We are looking for opportunities to further integrate into that model. As again, there's thousands of developers working on Backstage and open source versus the few hundred that we may have internally, which means that that's tons of better support that we'd like to use.
Yeah, well, there are other ways that you can contribute as well. I mean, what you guys have been talking about is kind of on the nose for contributing. It's what we really need to grow the platform. But one of the more unique perspectives that Booz Allen tries to bring to open source is particular industry experience that most other companies don't have because they don't work with the federal government. We have a lot of exposure to demand signals and trends in the government industry that a lot of other folks don't have, so we can get ahead of them and we can use that to kind of help shape the requirements on the roadmap that Backstage has for the betterment of everybody. We have a couple of things that we've talked about with the team. One of them is Section 508 compliance. If you're unfamiliar, Section 508 is a set of government standards for accessibility. It's required in government applications, but it's, in our view, good citizenship to just do it all the time. So by getting that to be a native part of Backstage, we're ensuring that people with disabilities can still be a part of our community. And I think that one of the most beautiful things about open source is inclusivity, making sure that we have everyone involved who wants to be involved, welcoming them and their diversity of ideas and experiences. And by having 508 compliance, that ensures that those people can be a part of this. We're inviting them in very explicitly, and that's a great thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, on that note, the importance of inclusivity in the open source ecosystem, I think we should wrap this up. So I really want to thank all of you for joining today. Every time I talk with somebody who's contributing to the Backstage ecosystem, I learn something new. It's amazing, the energy and the innovation that's going on in this space. So again, thank all of you for your contributions and joining us today. I'd also like to thank everybody who tuned in to learn more about Spotify plugins for Backstage. If you're interested in learning more about our plugins, please contact us at backstage.spotify.com/plugins.